Hello and welcome back to my France Let's Play. What we're doing right now is we're working on getting the Ministry of War so that way we can get some daily army experience. But one thing that I kind of realized I forgot to do last episode was talk about the general plan of my strategy of how I'm going to do this. So the simple explanation is I'm going to be focusing on armor, getting green air, and the Navy. What I would like to be able to do is have these guys join the Entente, or worst case scenario, the Reichswehr, send my tanks up here and push through here, and also assist with aircraft, and also use the Navy to both help protect my ports and also convoy raid when possible. I don't know how I'm going to be able to do all those things with my current economy, but it's going to be what we're going to try to do. Also, I'm starting to think that maybe this construction speed, is it through the entire thing? Let's see. 10 construction speed. Phase 1. We're going to see after that stops to see if that's something that we have only during its activation that stays there. Something we'll have to wait to see. But right now, I'm not taking any chances, and I'm going to spend it all on that. You have motorized interwar cars that we're not going to be using. Motorized needs using motorized and tank. Tanks that we need to make. Yeah, okay, with that, I don't think we need to make interwar armored cars. So that's going to go ahead. I don't want tactical bombers. I'd rather much spend them on naval bombers for now. Probably want it like that. Like that, probably. Alright. It seems that despite our extensive control over the nation's media, some officers have managed to find out the truth about the recent wave of scandals hitting West and failure. Spread the word about our extensive information gathering networks and printed out leaflets handed out back to officers' messes alike, denouncing the regime and our attempts to prevent officers from speaking their minds. Admiral Lacaz has been made into a new martyr for the Democratic camp, and though he retired in the wake of the scandal, it seems he is now in direct contact with Monarch's partisans. Though he justly knows our plan to deal with the dissent among the armed forces with some subtlety, there is far more worrying things. Only have we lost whatever trust still put office put in the regime. Believe what's currently spreading like wildfire contain confidential documents concerning the fabrication of various scandals, implicating this defamation campaign, high-ranking officers as well as many within the administration and the government. There's only one possible conclusion. There's a mole among us, and we need to catch her to prevent more leaks. Let's take a look at our Navy real quick. What do we have? Armored cruisers, battleships, cruisers, escort cruisers, and destroyers. We have another one that's submarines. Okay. Let's see, I'm not really sure what's better, Fleet Protector or Superior Tactician. Let's go Superior Tactician for now. And this guy is, of course, getting a Seawolf. You have more of this, and we'll go with... I think we're actually going to be pretty safe. Oh, concentrated industry. Jacques Bainville, born in 1879, known as historian, journalist, and one of the founders of the French Actions, died at 57 years old, born in a staunchly Republican family. He turned to monarchism, not out of nostalgia, but out of reflection and comparison, considering the Republic to be an unstable, fickle, and fundamentally incapable to compete with the stable and united Germany. Flick writer, he ceaselessly exalted the French monarchy in his historical works and could the many newspapers. Simultaneously, literary critic and financial analyst, he told Algeria as the revolution broke out, he wrote in the chaotic aftermath a short book that quickly became immensely popular, titled The Political Consequences of Peace. Bainville exposed his thoughts on the peace treaty between the CGT and the Germans, saying that just like the Republic is the daughter of Bismarck, engineered to weaken France, the Commune is the daughter of Wilhelm II, created to rot France down to her very roots so that she might eventually be turned into a little more of a vassal state in an inevitable coming war. This has been one of the pillars of the rhetoric of the AF, who tirelessly advocates for the fall of one daughter of both, so that France might be able to take on the other. Many in our nation are sensible to this kind of Prague's anti-German sentiment has certainly not subsided one bit among exiles. Vandel's funeral procession was followed by thousands of mourners, with political opinions, fellow writers, and academics, and even members of government attending the funeral. Massillon of Verdun himself, without statement honoring the life and works of the historian, now seems a prophet by many. 1% increase in national populism. I don't know if this is something we want to do, but you know what? You know what? We'll go for it. That changed the cost of these, didn't it? Did it make it more expensive or less expensive? I'm not sure. Badone raid. Raiding is a way of life for the Badone people. Their large nomadic lifestyle prohibits them from settling down somewhere habitable and farming for themselves. The harsh climate of Sarah also offers little in the way of life, which only reinforces their need to raid our settlements. A group of villagers from Martiana has petitioned our aid in defending the settlement against the raiders. Once or twice a year, doing raiders out of the desert, ransack the town to ride off, usually with several grazing animals to take for food. France helps their own, and they must be strong on their own. That is 100% worth it. Alright, Les Paradas. The constitutional laws and the military code will prevent the French armed forces, often called the Garde the Great, to go on strike. It seems that following the La Casa affair and subsequent revelations leaked to soldiers, officers, eventually the general public, many outraged officers have ignored this principle and suddenly decided to walk down the street to protest. While forces were supposed to suppress any protest, many police and military officers, confused by this unusual situation, decided to simply stand aside to avoid fighting their comrades and friends. Many civilians are watching this protest out of curiosity, and it is now even obvious for everyone that Pétain's rule is far from being popular even within the armed forces. Traditionally, the one place where the regime was most secure. Protests are banned in active duty soldiers. The official version of events is that officers are simply parading. From that, most opposition journals, underground, and democracy, still being openly published, are now ironically designate their protests. The parades have been going on for days now, and this is time we choose to deal with the situation. In the meantime, the second bureau is still investigating to find the mole that created this ridiculous situation in the first place. Maybe they'll calm down eventually. Oh, that's great. Weekly stability loss. At least we'll get the army experience soon. We're losing infantry equipment overall, motorized. Motorized and light tanks important, and these guys attack on the patrol in Niger. There's often send patrols around Niger to assure us of payments in these lands, as we don't have a lot of permanent bases there, but where to assert our control, we have to resort to such regular patrols. Our patrols are usually uneventful, but it wasn't the case this time. Soldiers were suddenly attacked by a full Tog force armed and determined. They're hiding behind relief, waiting for the patrol to come closer before they charge with cavalry towards it. The first panic shots of the patrol didn't make the horses furious to fall over, but soon was the French horses that started to fall as a group of Targans behind the dunes started shooting from another angle. Greatly helped surprise soldiers fell left and right to the bullets and blades of the Targans before the survivors retreated disorderly. Survivors managed to get back to the nearest colonial outpost to tell a story. The attack is an outrage, but we quite powerless to punish them unless we send a full one army to search the desert. We have to punish people near from us. We're probably to our collaborators anyways. An outrage. It's 3 manpower, compliance, resistance. Okay. Well, this is great. Also, what is our current navy looking like? We are building more cruisers. Okay. So what do we want to do right now? Vision training. None of that's bad. Although we're not putting much of a focus on infantry. There's a lot of stuff I want to do. Let's take armor research time first. General Jean Stan has brought critical innovations to the French army, pioneering an aerial reconnaissance up the exile of organizing an in-depth exploration of the Sahara, but most importantly, he was the first to recognize the potential of tanks to theorize their tactical and strategic use. He'd brought us so close to victory in the Weltkrieg, his legacy lives on in our forces today. There we got construction done. Innovation. The Dubba mission attacked the beautiful hillside that regularly supports the host of tourists and allies. It supports Tuska's former self. Dula has been a site of civilizing missions since 1924 when the mission first chose the location to begin their ministry to the local population. The nearby home, built in the traditional style of fellow people with their grass roofs, did not fare well, and a mob of natives, angry of the continued presence of Christian missionaries bringing the gospel to the people, disrupting their former way of living, torched the town. Loose stability, compliance, resistance target. Alright. The parade continues. Right, in the days passing, yet soldiers and officers continue to parade through the streets, tirelessly joined every day by more and more civilians dissatisfied with the regime. Democrats, disappointed Democrats, even monarchists, emboldened by monarch's escape and the lack of enforcement against these protests. Protests had so far been mostly about protesting the regime policies, don't taking a radical turn, openly call for the marshal to step down, believing him unfit to rule even a second more. Though many still hesitate to put the blame on him personally, as some consider him senile and under control of his close advisors. In any case, the number of protests is increasingly each day, and our forces still refuse to take any active action against them. Best barring access to the way of a presidential palace and other important government buildings, with discreet but numerous gestures of solidarity between the two, the most radical forces of the regime believe it. Better attack immediately that it might be too late to stop Monarch still on the run. They'll try themselves out eventually, right? Or we must act quick, but we need help. We'll act quick, but we need help. Workers run away, faced with a reduction in provisions as a result of the newly policy based by our government. Large groups of native workers have decided to take the risk and run for it. Overnight, those skilled workers got up from their barracks, raided the mess for food and supplies, and set off in the desert to find their way back home. These men was made impossible by sweeping winds, erasing from tracks and sand. We must find more workers if we hope to finish this project. Oh, that's probably because we took funding away. Okay. Coup d'etat in Sam. President Foldu comes facing obvious that the regime has lost most of its basic support. Veterans are shocked by the action of the man they have revered for so long, and Logad Malta is making herself heard loud and clear. She's outraged by the government's repression. The government desperately needs allies, and it seems that one group in part might be in its partnership. The royalist action is France indeed. Charles de Gaulle comes to with privately Marshal Pétain about a potential alliance of circumstance. Russia seems to have taken upon himself an active link between his mentor and the party he has never been in sympathies for, and the national interclass have been consistently and brazenly opposed to the Republic. Considering Pétain's regime has barely stepped up from the weak pre-war government, they share a common trait: distrust for parliamentary democracy and liberal parties who led to fall of France in the first place. As such, that French action is suggesting unofficial cooperation with the regime, at least until the crisis is over. Partnership that could prove serve for the land as government. As an old, very well-established party, the French action many sympathizers among both the upper and lower classes. Within the church, the army, and even enjoys some popularity with the native population, joined by promises of decentralization and respect for local customs. Its daily newspaper is among the most widely read in the nation, and it controls a network of newspaper vendors, the Constable, the King Camelots, and security service made up of youngsters and students has drawn some described as paramilitary force used to street walls and crowd control. Finally, some of the more radical members of the AF ended up being one to use every total proposal to take more direct action against the Democratic camp. All this could be used to serve the regime and finally end the crisis once and for all. But this partnership could alienate the last few loyal partisans of Pétain. There's no doubt the service of the AF would come down to cost of compromise with them and down the road. The regime might simply not survive the next few weeks if we don't take it out. Fine, all is fair in politics. Thanks, but we'll manage to get this by ourselves. All is fair in politics. Yeah, right, yeah. That's going to go down pretty quick. After this, professional army would be nice, but we want to get down here and we want to start getting our focus on probably getting more battleships and destroyers, maybe. Alright, it was founded in the 20s by Frere Abbas in the Chaos of Exile, calling itself the principal media outlet of the International alongside the main Action France. Action Algeria has become one of the most popular newspapers in the Algerian department. The slogan free from colony to province, summaries in a fight alongside Interquest principles, assimilation within Greater France while still retaining privileges, tradition, and local laws against the centralization, disregard for indigenous customs of the Republic, demanding native autonomy and social and economic regulation, universal suffrage in municipalities, and for native notables to constitute an assembly advising the French government. Bosses quickly found sons among natives, particularly the assimilated elites and the influential indigenous chiefs. eager to defend their way of life against an ever-encroaching Republican government. However, the localist proposal of the action is not the only thing that has found responsibility. The anti-Semitic rhetoric is also providing popular legacy of the Khan Decree, a law that granted full French citizenship of the Jewish population of French Algeria, not to the Arab and Berber Muslim population, who remains to stay essentially second-class citizens. This wedge between communities that have lived together in relative peace for centuries has proven to be exploit for a far right, as some groups of parties even almost repel the decree to gain support for the natives, either out of genuine or simply out of pragmatism. Know that nothing can be achieved without the support, or essentially, of the indigenous. On the 14th of July, we celebrate National Day, military parades, as well as popular street celebration of fireworks are painted all across France, and a joyous celebration of the greatness of our nation. For long, it has been celebrated on this day as a topic of heated debate between left and right. The left would insist as they have celebrating 1789 during the Bastille Fort as a partisan royal presidential army, while they considered to be starting point of the French Revolution, while the right would consider the day of commemorating the Fête de Fédération, a massive holiday festival that took place on France a year later to celebrate the unity of the French nation and end of the political struggle of the revolution itself. History proved that hope wrong, but this hasn't stopped the debate from rising every year. In 1880, law instituting the National Day of 18th July simply abstains from taking a side, but thankfully we have put the country to rest. As an amendment voted by Assembly this year is great that we are indeed commemorating the festival of the Federation today. Either way, let's enjoy ourselves. So probably the first thing we want to do is we want to get our tanks being a lot better. We need medium tanks, and we're going to need some other stuff too. Let's do Ministry of Naval Affairs, because what I would like is I would like the ability to raid. Actually, let's see. Let's take a quick look. 25 to 373. Like, we have 85. We need, like, a lot to catch up to them. With Ministry of Naval Affairs, the Ministry of Naval Affairs, once tasked with overseeing the administration of both our colonies and naval forces, now solely dedicated to the needs of the Navy. Control of the Mediterranean will be essential to retake them, and shall by, as such, the Ministry will be sure that our Navy can stand up to them. Alright, let's see. Actually, you guys are probably more important. 61 to 121, 85. Yeah, okay. Maybe we'll fight the British less. The deal with minutes the action France affected me. The parties paper changed its stance on the regime, and the monarchist officers and soldiers participating in the parade simply stopped showing up. Using its vast influence in the upper class and armed forces, the parties managed to soothe some of the dissent coming from there, and the Comte Roy now show up every day to push back against the protests in secure key areas, not showing the same hesitations of regular forces to fight. They're still parading, not having any care for regulations or avoiding injuries. It seemed that the regime can breathe a sigh of relief. The monarchist movement is now far less ascendant. However, parts of the loss for the ground the Democratic camp is due to the brutal tactics of the more radical elements of French action. They have organized themselves in highly structured, secretive, and independent groups to take direct action against their supporters, with no oversight by the party and none from the government. Intimidation, assassination, and bombings. The last few weeks, it seems nothing is too far for them to take on the Democratic camp. They think the organization de Qatar, since the 400 Blows organization, or less literally, organization to raise hell. It's impossible to deny that they have been incredibly effective in pressing opponents, but I himself is quite horrified by the terrorist nature of the group. Going too far, let's end this. We have no choices for the salvation of France. For the salvation of France. Railway strike, improve the conditions. It will improve the conditions. Alright, Poland elects a king. Alright, next we need a bunch of political power, which we have none of. And we're losing, actively. Railway needs to be done. Ooh, we should probably go for radio. Let's go ahead and take these guys. Avant-garde made. The Men in Green. Communards have announced a program to change from culture and entertainment, so-called international avant-garde of radical artists aiming to tear down all that is beautiful in the world and transform it to fit the taste of moment, all in the name of making art more palatable to the proletariat. Put it simply, they aimed to do nothing less than destroy French culture. The manifesto is professed the need to abolish the canons of French literature and poetry, as well as radically transform the roles of French grammar decried as antiquated and bourgeoisie. Thus, this crime against taste, culture, beauty, and frankly civilization itself, the men of various academy institutions of France have assembled a common congress to produce a counter manifesto, all clad in their green-trimmed formal attire, completed with personal ornate swords and white coats. The 417 members of the Institute have signed a common appeal to the general efforts of perverts and bohemians, penned a manifesto in which they call for the creation of the International Institute of Occident to fight the vanguard of culture. This inventive has received wide acclaim in France and among our Entente allies, as well as the German sphere. As for the international avant-garde, it has responded by setting up an abstract statue representing bourgeoisie culture classic made out of copies of the manifesto in front of their former location of the Institut de France in Paris. As an inauguration ceremony was underway, it was set ablaze by the neonatic George Patel and moved that was applauded as an example of pure artistic potency by the organization. Yet another reason to put down the commune. So that gives us stuff that'll last for like maybe 2 weeks before we lose it again. It's fine. Everything will be fine. In the wave of terrorist violence against the Democrat faction, the presence of increasingly aggressive camels on the outskirts of the parades is running high. One day, some soldiers brought their service weapons to protect sanity for self-defense. The next, the Camelots themselves were armed in reaction to this. Both police and military deployed to maintain order among the heavy weaponry. Furthermore, while the violence against Morgan's partisans had intimidated many, it also brought much more sympathy from the general public, and such more and more civilians took part in the parades. Was sort of a rather absurd display of anger by government who was now a daily incident from sunrise to sunset, with occasional brawls between protesters and Camelots. Actually, despite numerous injuries, some injury balls, no deaths occurred in the parades. That is, until today, as one of the usual fights broke out between protesters and Camelots, a shot rang out, followed by a cry of pain. No one knew who fired or where it came from. After a split second of shocked silence, there was chaos. More and more gunshots came for each other, and with each one, protesters, Camelots, police, and military fell to the ground. Some wounded, some dead. Initially overwhelmed, the regime was quickly regaining composure and inside of the dead comrades, shedding any feelings of hesitation they might have had towards fighting fellow soldiers. These things quickly turned to street fighting, with barricades and hastily constructed by protesters engaging what could only be described as fighting or cheat. Most of them being active duty soldiers or veterans, there was certainly no confusion, but no panic. Though they may have been pushed to, the protesters remained in control of much of the Central Algiers as the government forced to wait for their orders. Call for a meeting. We need to resolve this situation immediately. Democratic strategy meeting has gone on for hours, but was already evening. Deeply shocked by events, Marshal Pétain has missed all proposals from the military, the police, Mr. Advisors, even his protege Charles de Gaulle, considering them all seen too many lives. Talked that the protesters had gone nowhere, and the lack of central leadership among them would make this impossible anyways. But a tense silence had fallen in the conference room in the presidential palace, broken only by the sounds of occasional gunfire. Then news came. The president had seized heavy machine gun and chosen to fall back further and fortify a large plaza where the field hospital had been set up. He thought it would be extremely costly, and everyone in the room knew it, and then was a whisper, "Shell them." The young Navy officer had broken the silence. He continued, "We could shell them. The infantry class dreadnought Democrat is anchored a few miles from Algiers. If we wait until nightfall and order to shell Plaza, it would create enough confusion to storm the camp while minimizing damage to the city and loss of our forces. They're expecting an assault from land, straight now from sea." After a few seconds of silence, the line never done angrily stood up, but he could speak. Charles de Gaulle and the Russian intervened. "I am afraid we have no choice here. If we could let the situation fester, we could wake up tomorrow to a general insurrection. We could let this revolution to bud and act fast. I'm sorry, Marshal, but this is how the time for action, not debate." Until Philip Pétain fell silent, the order was given. Okay, things are about to get spicy. Maybe we can get some political power back up here. The Confederation General de General Confederation were founded in 1920 by Mohammed Ali el-Malek. And notice since it's in a close spell on the sea, we of course quickly put them out at the time of the CGTT, but it stopped from existing underground. The Union always was close from the Tunisian nationalists of the Tory party, and the two underground organizations often worked together. This time they worked to foment a strike among the Tunisian dock workers in several factories in the south of Tunisia and Tunis. The propaganda wasn't already threatening enough. The strikes have also put the forefront world of independence from Tunisia. An absurdity, of course, but these works seem to believe in any way it's going to be the time for a bit of cleaning the dockers in the port of Tunis. And if the strikers want to disperse themselves, we'll have to send in the army. It's great. Massacre, bloodlust. This is how the foreign press described the events of Algiers. The proposed strategy was indeed extremely effective, and as soon as the first shells hit the protesters, abandoned any kind of organization events and fled in all directions, only to run into our forces assaulting the plaza, where they either immediately surrendered or promptly dealt with. Tales of mangled bodies, of brutal treatment of prisoners, and summary execution being spread by Communard agents. Our nation knows the truth. Next morning, the front page of the paper, attempted coup bravely defeated. The threat posed by these red traitors were finally dealt with only a few so-called remaining Democrats are now either in custody, waiting trial for their crimes, in hiding, though they will be found sooner or later, or they lie dead in mass graves, slowly filling up in the plaza, or being cleaned up. Bear Mordecai, or what is left of his body, was found and identified by his uniform. Bear himself is dead, and we can now breathe a sigh of relief. Marshal Pétain is, however, deeply affected by what happened and has not left the presidential palace since, using to see anyone other than his wife and his confessor, only occasionally wandering outside of the quarters, mumbling to himself. As such, Charles de Gaulle has unofficially stepped in to help run government affairs for the time being. After all, who better than the Lions protege to make sure that it goes smoothly in critical times? Having been once the rank of general for his bravery and skill dealing with the crisis, France's stability is now the utmost priority to the rooster. And as such, he was launched a new large-scale investigation to find and bring in justice those who might have been involved in the attempted coup. But much remains to be done. But all those who would dare it endanger the is critical times ignored. Longer Terry's behavior will be tolerated. Thankfully, the Marshal can count on de Gaulle's loyalty. Alright, political power is now moving in the right direction. Workers go on strike. We will have to do it. Right, Ministry Affairs. I wonder, now with all that done, can we do this yet? No, we cannot. A world-class navy. The most of the French Navy accompanying the government in exile in North Africa. Such navy is large, but many of our ships are outdated. In its current state, the navy could defend our shores, but is uncertain how it would fare if someone would attempt to contest our hold on the Western Mediterranean. We will strive for a large scale overhaul. Speaking of which, I didn't look at the most important thing. I have 85 ships, but I have, let's see, what do I check? 2 dockyards. So they're 7 to 11. Okay, now with this. Yeah, let's go for civilian intelligence. Humanism Integral. Integral Humanism, Temporal and Spiritual Problems of New Christianity. A recently published work of influential Catholic Jacques Maritain has caused passionate debate among Catholics. A convert from Protestantism, once close to the French action despite not being a monarchist, mostly out of suspicion towards representative democracy and opposition to anti-clerical policies of the Third Republic, Maritain has drifted after the shock of exile towards a more moderate position, closer to his personal movement in Christianity and democracy, rejecting both reaction and liberalism, secularism and close political Catholicism, embracing humanism, arguing for human rights, the importance of family, pro-strict democracy, responsibility towards the common good, all in spirit of the social teaching of the Church. The philosopher is somewhat going against the grain. Indeed, much of French Catholic laity and hierarchy have been radicalized by the current situation. The AF has been denounced. Integral humanism is the work of a traitor. Shout to democracy, Red Salvatore, however, among more progressive Catholics, French work was very well received, getting praise from Father Montoya, a close advisor of the Pope, with some moderates even being drawn away from French action. Heeding his warnings, the movement is merely using his faith tool for ideology. A new kind of integralism, huh? I'll take the political power. We need to recruit the head of intelligence, which will take a while, because we don't have political power. The de Gaulle government. After months of turmoil, of plotting, of violence caused by the enemies of the nation, it seems that things are finally looking up for France. Having formed a new government, Charles de Gaulle, now President of the Council of Ministers, was finally able to start dealing with much of the lot that has been sent in the administration armed forces, plurocrats and sycophants, taking advantage of aging marshals, picking communard agents, monarchist sympathizers, and generally those who setting back national interests are being dealt with, arrested, judged by special courts, and either put down or imprisoned. Though we could have feared instability after the marshal's temporary condition, the Republic de Gaulle's energetic guidance, status as a respectable hero, and imposing Pétain, his own personal prestige elevated the fears of many. The sheer scale of the corruption has been dutifully reported by media, and each day a new arrest, a new scandal shocks the people who finally understood the truth, just as the rooster described it. Discord. The worst threat facing us does not come from inside borders but within. Defeats, the struggles, the crisis will not make sense. Our efforts to be sabotaged, wasted by inside forces. However, efforts finally do control with the parasites plaguing our soul, such as by petty liberal concerns. And de Gaulle rises extraordinary measures must be taken to ensure the salvation of France. As then obtain a proposal for the land of Verdun to resign as president of the French Republic and enjoy a glorious retirement and be able to care for his clearly ailing health, and for the motion to be the National Assembly granting government full powers to create one kind of new constitution better suited to defend national interests. Of course, final decision Marshall to take. Of course, the Gaul knows best, and it's time for the line to proudly retire. Right, looks like the Gaul's finally our leader. Alright, a new dawn rising on France. Lane himself has come to make a speech in front of the National Assembly, broadcasting radio saying his old age and ailing health. The tired Pétain announced his retirement. He tried to think others supports him in troubled times since the Grand Guard, and particular veterans, making less and subtle reference to Charles de Gaulle. His closing statements calling for peaceful transition power and reaffirming his full trust in de Gaulle to guide the nation through these troubled times and the people to continue the fight to retake them by. Marshal Pétain in his speech with this simple phrase, quoted from the iconic order so many years ago: Verdun, courage, de la, or be strong, we'll get 'em. Immediately followed by thunders of applause and standing ovation, and applause had done. Everyone started, Marshall, thank you. A breach of protocol that all in the room immediately happily imitated. Outside the building, the population spontaneously come together to say goodbye to the savior of France. The regardless of class and status, thank you for Pétain as he was leaving off foot. As the anger, all the fear of the past few weeks and years totally dispersed, Pétain himself, usually so stoic, looked emotion strangely enough relieved. Short break, Pétain, on support of extra France, rose to deliver a clearly well-rehearsed speech detailing the extent of the corruption recently unveiled and remaining his fellow congressmen of the orgy of violence of the Gulf nation, then calling for the extraordinary powers given to the Gaulle government was able to reform the assembly has taken and cleansed much of the rot that has taken since ago. It was too much that the thunders of applause motion was quickly put together. Philip Pétain is no longer a field marshal. That's sad. Doing radios. I guess that means de Gaulle's the man. That's still not done, but actually, let's finish this day. Dispute among the Volta kings. The colony of Volta, while practically conquered in 1896, is still composed of traditional kingdoms with few official powers, but with powerful influence on the population. The biggest of these is Mazi Kingdom, headed by the current Mugu Naba Kun II. While the legacy of the powerful kingdoms region before the French colonization, which spread its power far beyond the capital to neighboring kingdoms. However, other kingdoms such as Fada, Nagam, Bolsa, or I don't know how to pronounce these words, still exist along with their kings and continuing to fight for the hot war. This contest recently arose between the Mugu Naba and the other kingdom. Indeed, Naba praised the work of the native ethnologist, the Empire of Arjun. The book is a real innovation. It's the first ethnology book written by the native population itself. However, the book also spreads a view of the country being almost compiled to bow under the Naba, feeding and imitating very extent ambitions of Naba to make the Muslim kingdom dominant power in the whole world. This ambition did not sit with the other kings, wary of playing between the interests of the French colonists and those populations exert power of the Muslim once again. Representatives of each king came to the seat of the colonial government to compel them to send the matters. Who shall we support? But with smaller kings, we have to fight to conquer. We'll start with the smaller kings. We have you, so let's go ahead and take the next level of light tank. One more day, see if this switches over. Is it not? Isn't it supposed to be Charles de Gaulle? Okay. I feel like we should have given de Gaulle power by now, but he's basically in charge. But unfortunately, we have run out of time for this episode. Please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.